Welcome to Dungeon Academics. My name is Thomas and I will be your instructor. Dice. I really like dice. I have quite a collection. I'm a dice goblin at this point. I don't think I quite have the hoard to be labelled a dice dragon. But being a maths teacher as well, dice are a very familiar part of my entire life for many decades now. Now, one mechanic that Dungeons & Dragons does particularly well is dice as tokens. There are many classes and subclasses that use dice as tokens. So, for example, the Bard class has your inspiration dice, and you get a number of dice and you can use them for various features. The Rogue, every time it does a sneak attack, you get a number of sneak attack dice to add to your damage. And under the 2024 version, there are other features that these dice can be used to activate as well. I particularly like that one. Battlemaster Fighter has their Battlemaster Maneuver dice, and there are more as well. Dice are obviously a key part of the game, but using dice as tokens brings up additional features which I think are very nice. Firstly, you can spend the dice as a token. The dice represents the number of times you can do something, and when you use that feature, you remove one of the dice. Alternatively, the dice can be rolled as an enhancement. So when you use that feature, you roll that dice and the value of the dice is either added or subtracted to some total. What this means is that this token is doing double duty. It's generating a number as well as counting how many times you can use a feature. And the nice thing about using dice as tokens is that you can change the dice that you're using. For example, when a bard levels up, they get to occasionally upgrade their inspiration dice. They start as D6s and eventually they get upgraded to D8s, D10s and beyond. So the number of dice they have changes and the type of dice they have changes. Other classes and subclasses take a more shallow version of this. So for example, under the current rules, a rogue's sneak attack dice are always D6s. A Battlemaster's Battlemaster Maneuver dice are always D8s. And I think they're missing a trick there. It would be nice to incorporate this interesting design into more classes and subclasses. Have dice that can change both in what the dice are and how many dice the player has to activate and enhance their abilities. I'd quite like to see a system where a wizard has their wizard dice and the spells of their damage spells are based on this wizard dice. So as they level up or upcast their spells, you change the damage dice that the spell is using based on the spell slot and the wizard's level as well. I think that requires a bit of thought and playtesting, but there's certainly potential there. There is another aspect to this as well, and this comes under the commercialization. We have to remember that Dungeons & Dragons is a product as well as a game. And part of Wizards of the Coast's responsibility is to sell stuff. And I don't think they're doing a particularly good job of it at the moment because they're not making stuff that people want to buy. Now, one of the nice things about dice as tokens is that you probably already have a bucket of dice and you can just take those dice and use them as you need them. That's absolutely fine. This is a great example of a product that you don't need to have, but maybe it's nice if you get the special set anyway. So for example, if you were able to get a special set of dice as inspiration dice, your bardic inspiration dice, that might be quite nice. Just have, oh, these are my bardic inspiration dice, I'll keep those. Now, there is an issue here. And there is a way around this issue. The dice change what they are as you level up. So they start as D6s and eventually they become D8s, D10s and so on. So what do you do with the old dice? Do you not use them anymore? Do you discard them? Do you add them to your general pool? I think that's a bit of a shame. It's a bit of a waste and it makes the product somewhat unnecessary. if you're going to have a set of dice that has, let's say, 66, 68 and 6010 in it, but you only get to use one set of them at a time, that's a waste. That's not a product that I would buy, knowing that at any time 2/3 of the product is not doing its intended job. I'd rather just use generic dice. But how about a system where you add new dice to your dice pool, but the new dice are different? So let's say you start off with a number of D6s, and at some point you get D8s that you add to the pool. So now your pool is some D6 and some D8, and eventually you're going to add some D10s to that pool as well. So you're going to have a mix of dice, D6s, D8s, and D10s. Now, when that dice pool regenerates, you get to choose which dice you replace. So obviously, if you've used the better dice, you'll replace those as a priority. And when you use dice to activate an ability, if the score of that dice doesn't matter, if you're not rolling the dice as part of that activation, you just use the small ones. And where the result on the dice does matter, that's when you use the big ones. So you're now adding a little bit of a metagame into how you're using these dice. I'll save the bigger dice for when they're actually going to be rolled and the score matters, and I'll just use the smaller dice right away to activate features that don't require them to be rolled. So now you've got a situation where all of those dice are always going to be in your pool at higher level. You're not discarding any as you level up. So you'll start with just those D6s, and eventually you'll add some D8s and you'll add some D10s, and you won't not need the D6s in the pool. This is now a nice product. You can have a little tracker that shows what dice you have and when they level up. Maybe a little wooden stand with the dice on it. And as you use the dice and roll them, they get rolled and put into a separate pile. And then when they regenerate, whether it's a short rest or a long rest or something else, you put those dice back on the tracker. There are little spaces that indicate, and the spaces indicate which dice goes where, and a little note on how they regenerate. So now you have a product that you can sell, a dice tracker and a special set of dice. And like I said before, this is the most absolutely pivotal thing on this. You don't need it. This is absolutely unnecessary product. You can just use regular dice and a piece of paper as a tracker, and that will work absolutely fine. But you now have the opportunity to buy something nice for your character. And if you're feeling a bit bougie, and 9 times out of 10 I definitely am, I'd want this tracker. I'd want these better dice to add to my collection, to represent me, to show that I am a serious bard player. Look at this lovely piece of kit that I have. That's how I would sell more products as a Dungeons & Dragons designer. I would make rules that have opportunities for you to buy extra gear for your character. Anyway, that's just a quick thought on dice. I've always got time to talk about dice. Enjoy your next game, whatever it may be.